The coffee was still hot when he walked out the door for the last time. I remember that clearly, the way the steam curled up from my mug in slow, unhurried loops, and how I sat at my kitchen table watching it, completely still, not frozen, not numb, just still. The kind of still that only comes after a very long time of knowing exactly what you're going to do. He had slammed the door. That was his style, always making sure the exit was loud enough to feel like a punishment. He wanted me to flinch. He wanted me to run after him, grab his arm, say something desperate and small. I had done that before, years ago, when I still believed that keeping the peace was the same thing as being loved. I didn't flinch. I picked up my mug, took a long sip, and looked out the window at the oak tree in my front yard. My oak tree. The one I had planted the year I moved into this house 22 years ago, when the roots were still shallow and the trunk was still thin enough for me to wrap both hands around. Now it was taller than the roofline. The roots went deeper than anyone could see. I thought about that for a while. Then I smiled. Let me tell you how we got here. My boyfriend moved into my house on a Tuesday in late October, 3 years ago. He arrived with 4 boxes, a duffel bag, and a story about a landlord who had sold the building with almost no notice. He had nowhere to go, he said. Just for a few weeks, he said, just until he got back on his feet. I should tell you something about myself first. I am 63 years old. I taught high school English for 31 years in the same district where I grew up. I have 2 adult children, a savings account I built carefully and slowly over decades, and a small house that I own outright, no mortgage, no liens, nothing. I paid it off 7 years ago, and I cried the day I signed the final paperwork, not out of sadness but out of a relief so deep it felt almost physical. I mention all of this because I want you to understand what was at stake. And I want you to understand why I, a woman who had spent 31 years teaching other people's children to read carefully and think critically, missed what was right in front of me for almost 2 years. The answer is loneliness. That is the only honest answer I have. My children are grown and live in other states. My closest friend had moved to be near her daughter the year before. I was retired, which I had looked forward to for so long, but which turned out to involve a lot of quiet afternoons and dinners, eaten standing at the counter because setting the table for one felt more sad than not setting it at all. When my boyfriend came along, warm, funny, filling every room he walked into with conversation and noise, I felt something in me relax that had been tight for a long time. I saw the red flags. I want to be honest about that. I saw them, and I chose, again and again, to look slightly to the left of them. The first one. He had been between jobs for 8 months before we met. He described it as a transition period, as a time of reassessing his direction. He was 58 years old. I told myself that could happen to anyone. The second one. In 2 years of dating before he moved in, he had never once picked up a dinner check without making a small performance of it, patting his pockets, checking his phone, saying, "Oh, I think I left my card in the car," just often enough that I stopped expecting him to pay and started reflexively reaching for my wallet before the bill even arrived. The third one. When his lease situation came up, and he asked to stay just for a few weeks, he used a phrase that I would later turn over in my mind many times. He said, "You have so much space here." Not, "I'm sorry to impose." Not, "I'll pay you back as soon as I'm settled." He said, "You have so much space here," as if my home was a resource, as if the question was simply whether I would share it. I let him move in. For the first several months, it was fine. It was better than fine, some days. Having someone in the house changed the texture of the mornings. There was coffee made before I got up. There were conversations over dinner. There was someone to call when I heard a strange noise at night and couldn't place it. But I am a woman who taught English for 31 years, and I know the difference between a story that is building towards something and a story that has quietly stopped moving. Around month 5, I started to notice that the few weeks had become indefinite without any conversation about it. I noticed that he had unpacked all 4 boxes and arranged things on shelves as if he had always lived there. I noticed that when I mentioned, casually, that the electricity bill had gone up significantly since he arrived, he nodded sympathetically and said, "These utility companies are really something," and then changed the subject. I told myself it wasn't the right moment to bring it up directly. I told myself that again in month 7 and month 9. By month 14, I had stopped telling myself anything and had simply reorganized my thinking around a new reality. He was not going to contribute. He was not between jobs and planning to get back on his feet. He was not in a temporary situation. He had found a situation that suited him perfectly, and he saw absolutely no reason to change it. I was his situation. The thing that finally moved me from vague discomfort to clear-eyed clarity was not a fight. It was not a dramatic moment. It was a Wednesday afternoon in March, about 18 months into his stay. I came home from a doctor's appointment to find him sitting in my armchair, not his armchair, mine, the one I had had reupholstered 2 years before he arrived, watching television and eating chips from a bag I had bought the day before. He didn't look up when I came in. He said, without turning his head, "Did you pick up the dry cleaning?" I stood in my own doorway with my coat still on, and I thought, he doesn't even see me. Not as a person with a life and a history and a home that existed before he walked into it. Not as someone who was doing him a profound kindness by letting him stay. I was background. I was infrastructure. I was the thing that kept the lights on and the refrigerator full while he sat in my chair and watched my television and ate my food and waited for nothing in particular. I said, "No, I forgot." He made a sound that wasn't quite a sigh and wasn't quite a complaint, but lived in the uncomfortable space between them. I hung up my coat, went to the kitchen, and started making dinner. And while I chopped vegetables I could not taste and did not particularly want, I made a decision so quietly that it barely registered as a decision at all. It was more like a door closing somewhere inside me, gently, but completely. With a click, I was done. Now, and this is important, being done did not mean I was going to walk back into that living room and announce anything. I had enough experience with this man by then to know exactly how that conversation would go. There would be wounded feelings and long silences, and a version of events in which I was the one being unreasonable. He would not leave. People who have found a comfortable arrangement rarely leave it voluntarily. They have to be made to understand, slowly and without drama, that the arrangement no longer exists. So, I said nothing. I served dinner. I asked how his day was. I washed the dishes. And the next morning, I made an appointment with a financial advisor. The first thing I needed to understand was exactly what I had. I knew the rough outlines: the house, the savings account, my pension, my investment account, but I had let things go a little soft over the past year and a half. I had added his name to a secondary checking account when he first moved in for household expenses, thinking it was the practical thing to do. I had been meaning to revisit that decision for months. My financial advisor laid everything out clearly. The secondary account with his name on it held about $1,100 at any given time. Not catastrophic, but not nothing either. More importantly, she pointed out that if he had been contributing to the household in any way that could be documented, and if we had been together long enough, there were legal questions worth addressing. She recommended I speak with an attorney. I appreciated her directness. I made an appointment with an attorney the following week. I told her the situation plainly. Unmarried partner, living in my home for 18 months, no financial contribution, no formal agreement of any kind. She told me plainly what I needed to do. The first step was to separate the finances completely. Remove his name from the secondary account, close it, open a new one in my name only. Do this before taking any other action, and do it without announcing it. The second step was to document the ownership of the house, clearly not that there was any ambiguity, since the deed had always been solely in my name, but she wanted me to have a copy of everything accessible, organized, and in a safe place outside the house. She recommended a safety deposit box at my bank. The third step was more delicate. She explained that in my state, an unmarried person living in someone else's home does not have the same rights as a tenant unless there is a written rental agreement. Since we had no such agreement, my rights as the homeowner were very clear. But if I wanted him to leave, I still needed to follow a process, give proper written notice, allow the required time to respond. She prepared a document for me and told me when and how to use it. I left her office feeling something I had not expected to feel. Calm. Not relieved, not triumphant, just calm. The same way you feel when you've been carrying something heavy for a long time and you finally set it down and realize the weight was real, it wasn't in your head, and you were right to want to put it down. I closed the secondary account on a Thursday morning while he was out. I told no one. I opened a new checking account at a different bank entirely, a bank where I had never had any account, where his name appeared nowhere, where the only person with any access was me. I transferred everything from the secondary account into it and then closed the secondary account at the original bank. Total time, 90 minutes. I brought the folder of house documents to the bank that same afternoon and placed it in the safety deposit box. Deed, survey, insurance documents, records of the mortgage payoff, all of it. I asked the bank officer to confirm that access was restricted to me alone. She confirmed it. On the way home, I stopped at a hardware store and bought 3 new lock cylinders. I want to pause here and address something directly, because if you have ever changed the locks on a home where someone else has been living, you know there is a practical question that arises. What do you do about every key that person might have had access to? He had one key that I had given him, but in a house where someone has lived for over a year, that is rarely the only copy. I spent 2 evenings going through the house systematically. The spare key that used to hang on a hook inside the pantry door, gone. So long ago I had almost forgotten about it. A second spare that I had kept in a kitchen drawer for years, still there. I found a third key I hadn't thought about in a long time. In the pocket of a coat hanging in the hallway closet, a coat he had worn occasionally. I collected all of them. Then I changed all 3 locks myself. I had watched 3 tutorial videos, and it took me about 45 minutes per lock. My neighbor, who is 71 and has done more home repairs than most contractors I have met, came over for the second lock and supervised. She asked no questions. She handed me tools when I needed them and told me I was doing fine. When I was finished, there were 2 keys to this house. Both of them were mine. One was in my purse, one was in the safety deposit box. He did not know any of this had happened. That was the part that required the most from me, not the logistics, not the legal steps, not the physical work of changing the locks. The part that required the most was continuing to come home every evening and make dinner and watch television and say goodnight as if nothing had changed. I am not naturally deceptive. 31 years of teaching required a certain directness. Students always knew when you were being less than honest with them, but I had learned something else in those same 31 years. That timing matters. You don't interrupt a student mid-sentence to correct a small error when they are in the middle of working something important out. I was waiting. I had given myself a date. Not a specific calendar date, but a condition. I would move forward when I was ready, and I would know when I was ready. In the meantime, I did things that were only for me. I took a long weekend trip to see my daughter. The first time I had done anything purely for myself in over a year. I had lunch with a former colleague I had been meaning to call for months. I started walking every morning. Something I had let slide completely. Each morning, I walked the same route through my neighborhood and past my oak tree, and I thought about the roots, how deep they went, how little it would matter if someone tried to push that tree over now. The moment came on a Sunday in early June. He had been on his phone most of the afternoon, which was not unusual. What was unusual was the energy around it, a low-level irritability, a few times stepping outside to take calls, a particular way of turning the phone face down on the table when I walked past. I recognized the energy. I had seen it before, in a different context, years before him, and I knew what it meant even before I knew what specifically it meant. After dinner, he became very focused on me in a way he had not been in a long time. He asked about my weekend with my daughter. He asked whether I had enjoyed myself. He said, in a tone that was calibrated very carefully to sound casual, that he had been thinking about us, about the future, about how things were going. He said he thought we had something real. He said he thought it was time to think about making things more official. I asked him what he meant by that. He said he had been thinking about the house, about how it made more sense, practically speaking, for both of our names to be on it. He said he had done some research, and it was actually quite a simple process, just a matter of filing some paperwork. He said it would give us both more security. I looked at him across the table, and I understood everything with a completeness that was almost restful. He had not been having a change of heart. He had been doing research. He had, at some point in the past weeks or months, looked at what I had this house, the years of equity, the stability I had built, and decided that the next step was to attach himself to it legally. He had concluded, based on 3 years of observation, that this was a reasonable expectation, that I would agree, that I would perhaps even be grateful for the gesture. He had looked at my oak tree and decided it was time to put his name on it. I said, "That's a big step." He said he knew, but he thought we were ready. I said I would need to think about it. He smiled. It was the smile of someone who believes the answer is already yes and the delay is only formality. I smiled back. That night, after he had fallen asleep, I sat in the kitchen for a long time with a cup of tea and the quiet. I thought about the notice document still in my purse, the one my attorney had prepared. I thought about the date at the top of it and the 15 days that followed. I thought about everything that was already done, the accounts, the locks, the safety deposit box, the second key that went nowhere except back to me. I thought about the deed with one name on it. Then I went to sleep, and I slept better than I had in months. I gave him the notice the following morning. I had rehearsed how I wanted to do it. Not a confrontation, not a speech, not an argument. I handed him the envelope while he was having his morning coffee, and I said, "This is something you need to read. I'm going to give you some time with it." He looked at the envelope. He looked at me. He opened it. I watched his face as he read it. I watched the confusion, then the disbelief, then something harder moving underneath both of them. He set the paper down on the table very carefully, the way people set things down when they are trying not to throw them. He said my name. I said, "I've given you 15 days. I think that's more than enough time to make arrangements." He said I was being ridiculous. He said he had been here for 3 years. He said I couldn't just hand him a piece of paper. He said a lot of things, in escalating tones, and I sat across from him, and I listened to all of it the way you listen to weather, acknowledging that it is happening, waiting for it to pass. When he finished, I said, "I know this is hard. I'm sorry it's come to this," and I meant both of those things genuinely. I was not being cold, but I also was not being moved. The door that had closed in me that March afternoon in the kitchen was not going to open again because someone raised his voice. He left that morning, slamming the door behind him. I heard his car back out of the driveway too fast. He came back twice in the following 2 weeks to collect his things. The first time I was home, and we did not speak much beyond logistics. The second time, I was deliberately not home. I had gone to have lunch with my neighbor, the one who had helped me with the locks, and he had to use the key I had left in an envelope by the door with a note, explaining it was the only one that would work, and asking him to leave it when he was done. He left it. On the 15th day, the house was mine alone again, for the first time in 3 years. I walked through every room. Not in a dramatic way, I wasn't staging a victory lap. I walked through them the way you walk through a house you have come back to after being away for a long time, reacquainting yourself with the details. The way the afternoon light comes through the window in the front bedroom. The particular quiet of the kitchen in the evening. The sound of this house when it is only my sounds in it. I moved the armchair back to where it had been before he arrived, next to the window where I like to read. It had been in the corner by the television for 3 years. I had stopped reading in it because it faced the wrong direction. I pulled it back to its original spot, sat down in it, and looked out at the oak tree in the fading afternoon light. The roots were still there. They had been there all along. Nothing that had happened in the past 3 years had touched them. My daughter called that evening. I had not told her everything. I had not wanted to worry her during the process, but I had told her enough that she knew this day was coming. She asked me how I was. I told her I was fine, genuinely fine. Not the kind of fine that means, please don't ask me more questions, but the kind that means exactly what it says. She said, "I'm proud of you, Mom." I sat with that for a moment. It's a strange thing, being 63 years old and hearing your adult daughter say she is proud of you. But there it was, and I wasn't going to deflect it. I said, "Thank you." I meant it. I want to say one more thing before I finish, because I know some of you are listening to this and you are not on the other side of it yet. You are still in the middle of it. You are still setting the table for someone who does not see you. You are still making small adjustments to your own life to accommodate a person who has never once made a small adjustment for you. I am not going to tell you what to do. I know better than most people how complicated these situations are, how many reasons there are to wait, how much easier it is to keep things quiet than to begin the long process of changing them. I waited longer than I should have. I told myself stories that were not entirely true. I know how that works, but I will tell you this. The morning I opened that account at the new bank, the one with only my name on it, I walked out of that bank and stood on the sidewalk for a moment in the late morning sun, and I felt something that I had not felt in a very long time. It wasn't triumph. It was something quieter than that. It was the feeling of standing on ground that is solid under your feet. The feeling of knowing, without any doubt, exactly where you are. That feeling is available to you. It starts with knowing what is yours. Not what is ours, not what you share, not what exists in the complicated space between two people's needs and two people's stories. What is yours? The account number, the deed, the locks. Start there. The rest follows. I picked up my coffee mug, the one with the small chip on the handle that I have had for 12 years and planned to keep for 12 more. And I looked out at my oak tree and I thought about roots. Then I went inside and I made myself breakfast in my kitchen, in my house, on my land, and I took my time.